on this computer. Okay, guys, let's start. So a quick introduction to each other. Like, what do you do, and what is the reason for wanting to join this awareness talk that I'm doing? And I mean, I've taught you constellation work, does not matter. We still pick up something new, we learn something new. I mean, I know from my situation, from my own personal journey, mother work is something that I still have to keep diving into whenever something happens in my life, because the effect of the mother on a child, regardless of the gender, is quite deep, and it's quite transformational also. So what happens is that if a mother is, wounded herself, if she has not been able to heal from her own stuff, from the baggages that were handed down to her, she unconsciously, not of course she doesn't choose that consciously, to pass it on to their children. So whether it's a boy child or whether it's a girl child, both of them are definitely affected. So I know from my personal space also, just with something that I experienced. Okay, someone else is also joining. Hi, Ramni. Is that how you pronounce your name?
Yes, hi.
Hi, good evening.
Hi,
Good evening.
good
I just
evening.
started, so you joined at the right time. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Did you join the community also?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I did.
Okay. Because I do
Yeah.
keep on doing something or the other. And so people who are in the community, it's easier for them to get the notifications, because I may not be able to send personal messages and things like that to everyone. So
Okay.
I'm happy to do that. Thank you so much for joining. So I just started off with what is mother wound, and I was talking about my personal experiences also. So mother wound is something that I think has affected all the children around the world, not just with our generation, but previous generations have profoundly been affected by the impact of the relationship of a child as adult children now with their mothers. So this is something that I still have to, despite having done so much of inner work around multiple layers of my connection, my relationship with my mother. Whenever something happens in my personal space, because life still happens, right? Even with the awareness that I know I have, I always somehow keep looping back into my bond with my mother, and there is still something that comes up that I have experienced with her. My conscious mind is not aware of it, but that comes to the surface to be healed. So I just recently had, I was telling the group also, I recently had a knee ligament tearing in May. And despite thinking that, my God, I'm so sorted, I've done so much of inner work, and I've reached this certain stage in my healing journey, da da da, all that, I still ended up in this physical, discomfort and a lot of pain, where I was on wheelchair for 2 weeks and homebound, unable to drive. Even going to the washroom was feeling very traumatic for me. And in that moment, I actually felt that I have no idea who I am. I have regressed back again in a child form, crying and wanting to be held was very profound for me. And when I did my inner work, so I know this from my, so that adult consciousness is also there, as I am navigating this very complex situation that occurred for me suddenly. So the adult consciousness is also there. So the moment I started doing much deeper work into now why this has happened, I basically came to another layer which I never thought existed. And it was in the body. That is why there was a frozen moment in time when I was 6 months old, and basically my mother did not want me. She tried aborting me when she was carrying me in the womb, and of course she will never admit that. But these are all the things that came up in my healing journey, and sometimes they were revealed to me in my dreams also, exact moments, exact words that she had said. So I have been able to uncover all of that. And what came up was that, of course, she tried aborting me when I was in her womb, because she was not ready to be a parent back then. And then when I was eventually born, she probably tried harming me as well. And that frozen memory was not in my conscious mind, but it was in my physical body. And so the moment I had this knee ligament tearing, there was a profound feeling inside of me where I felt I've regressed back as a child, was that I'm losing my body. And I was actually very anxious, and I went into my depressive state, uh, feeling that I'm losing my body. So when I did my inner work, what came up was I was actually losing my physical body when my mother, in her own mental state, whatever she was in, tried harming me as a 6-month-old baby. So of course, consciously do not have the memory, but when I did that inner work, this came to the surface, and I had to do a lot of release of that because of the stuck and frozen memory that surfaced. So what is a mother wound? Sorry, I went a bit too long with my own story, but the why I want to create awareness around this complex dynamic that we all experience with the primary caregiver, that we all associate with, because the mother is someone who we know more than the father as well. We have more deeper connection, more intimate connection, more so with the mother than with the father. And the understanding that we create and the kind of bond we are finally able to establish with our fathers, regardless of the gender, of course, is also influenced a lot from the kind of connection we are able to establish with our mother. So oftentimes I've seen in my healing practice, because I do a lot of complex work, healing work for my clients also, a lot of time I've seen that the adult child who has finally come into the therapy world and healing themselves have been looking at their fathers even from the perspective of their mothers. So if the connection of the father and a mother was not healthy, was not harmonious, was not balanced, there were incompletions, there were unmet needs, there was conflict, abuse, all of that. That is the point of view the child is going to carry towards the father as well. So they'll have to exclude one of the parent in order to be loyal to one of the parent, which most of the time, not always, of course, there are these, it's very subjective as well. So most of the time, a child, girl or a boy, actually exclude the father from the perspective of the mother. And that exclusion keeps on appearing in our external reality. So anything that we face in our internal reality, that is our emotions, our health, how we look at ourselves as a person, which is what is called self-worth, or the identity that we form, the kind of connection we have with other people in our life, all of that is influenced by the connection we have or have not been able to establish with our mother. And anything, of course, in our external reality, that is another topic, maybe I'll have another one on father's wound as well, is influenced by how we related to our father or were never able to relate to with our father. All right, so anything internal is the mother's influence on our lives, and it's extremely important to understand. So whenever we start our healing work, the first thing that we need to understand and heal and resolve is the connection we had or we could not have with our mothers. And every person I've come across in my therapeutic space, deep down, just wanted to be held by the mother. So the therapist creates that space where that very deep, unconscious longing of a person gets to be, I'm not saying 100%, but gets to some form of completion. So every time, if you resonate with this, just, I mean, as I'm talking about this, reflect it in your own inner space, that is this something that you always expected from your partners, expected from your, work, with the kind of profession that you have, expected it from your friends, expected it from your siblings, the need to be held. All right. And it can be a very triggering, it can be a very painful realization that the mother that I got to experience could not give that to me. And so we look for that in all our other relationships as we are growing up, as we are connecting with the external world, and we don't find it unless and until we do the inner work and learn how to reparent ourselves. So let me read through some of the stuff that I've got here, because I was just intuitively talking about this. first of all, I want you to also feel what happens to you when you hear the word mother, right? What does that mean for you? What comes to your mind? Is there an image of your mother that pops up? And then how does that make you feel when that image is also inside of you? When the word mother comes up, um, how does your body feels when the word mother comes up? Is there any level of anxiety? Is there any level of sadness or grief? Anger also is something that most people have never been able to look at. So many adult children are actually very angry with their mothers also, but because it's a very confusing bond, we somehow end up internalizing that anger, pushing that anger inside of ourselves instead of expressing it, or instead of, so a therapeutic space actually allows you to let that out. um, so the mother wound is not about blaming mothers. Yeah, every mother was also a child at some point of their life. They were children, they were teenagers, they were also young adolescent, they were also somebody's daughter, right? They had a mother, they had a father. um, so she was also experiencing life in a certain way. She too inherited experiences, belief system from her family of origin. So family of origin is the family where she was born into. So she had inherited experiences, beliefs, and wounds from her own upbringing. And oftentimes, for example, if there were many siblings in the family of origin where she was born, and she was maybe in the middle, or maybe she was the first child, or maybe she was the last child, I've always seen the order of our mothers in their family system plays a huge role in how eventually she becomes a mother for for us later on in her life, when she creates her own family system. So of course, if she was the last child, how was she treated as that in that order? Okay, or how, but if, for example, if she was the first child, was she burdened with the responsibility of looking after the rest of the siblings? And this is most of the time the case. If she was a middle child, was she feeling lost? Was she feeling unvalued, undervalued? Was she feeling that she has to do something in order to earn the love or the attention of the mother? Right? So your mother's order in her family system creates a huge influence on how she eventually becomes a mother, how she is able to relate to you when she has you. The mother wound refers to emotional pain, unmet attachment needs. I'll talk about that also as I move on. The patterns, beliefs, and survival strategies that develop within our relationship with our mother, who actually is the primary caregiver, caretaker, right? So if the mother was stressed, for example, around the time you were born, if there was stress in her environment and she felt maybe neglected by your father, or if she felt that there was a lot of family pressure on her to do certain things, or she was burdened with the household responsibility, or there were financial crisis, that impression is going to be influencing you while you were being carried in the womb of your mother, right? So her survival strategies, which could be either she would shut down, go numb, freeze, or go into people pleasing, or becomes very guarded. So if these were her coping mechanisms, so everything of that is going to influence you. So her behaviors are going to influence you. You may end up having similar coping strategies as she had. It can also include patterns that are passed down across generations. So that is the work I do, generational trauma healing work, which means that your mother was a part of a system where there were either stories of control or abuse or violence, or sexual abuse also is something that was uncommon to talk about, but it does not mean that it was not happening. That was always happening in certain systems, but they were either kept as secrets, and that also creates shame around those experiences, and that shame also gets to be passed down to the next generation. So the mother herself our mother's herself is often carrying her own unresolved burdens, so her own stories that were created long before you were even created. That becomes her burden. So, with that, if she came into the relationship with your father, right? So, father and mother, both of them are coming from their own individual family of origin. I'm saying healing systems, coming from their own systems. So both the systems have influenced our parents in their own very unique way. And when they come together, none of that is dissolved on its own. That is why soon after, the honeymoon period is over, or soon after, uh, when probably they have their first child, oftentimes it is seen that's when the triggers between the couple, our mothers and fathers, begins to come to the surface. So their survival strategies and coping mechanisms actually come to the surface when they come together, when they are creating something, when they are uh, unable to have a shared understanding of how the future is going to look like, right? So all of those things are going to get triggered between them, because these are the invisible baggages both of them have been carrying, and obviously they're not aware that these are the what is triggering between us is not because the other person is actually trying to deliberately create those triggers or complexities in the relationship. These are the invisible baggages that are inherited by the mother and the father, and that begins to influence the relationship. And obviously, when we were born to such parents, we are also not free from those invisible baggages. So that becomes like a intergenerational trauma, right? Um, so family constellations. So family constellations is a therapeutic practice which beautifully and gently uncovers these entanglements, these hidden baggages, and the effects of the identities that were formed because of those traumas that normally consciously we are not aware of. So it beautifully brings it up to resolve them, to heal them. So, family constellation invites us to see this wound with compassion rather than blame. So, here, I always say that if, as children, we were either merged with our mother, and of course, we don't know that we are merged unless we do the healing work. So, either children are too merged with the mother, or a child can also go into the opposite polarity where they reject the mother completely. In both ways, the child is still going to get entangled with whatever is unhealed with the mother and beyond the mother, right? So healing allows us to come to a level of some balance, coming out of these extreme polarities, either rejecting the mother or getting merged with the mother. So when we are doing the constellation work, the healing work around what about my mother has influenced me, we are able to come to some level of balance and resolution within ourselves. So with this kind of work, I'm not saying we can, change our mother or something about our mother is going to transform. We don't say that, we can't guarantee that. Yes, it is possible. I've also seen connection between my client, adult client, and their mothers changing and healing. But I cannot guarantee that is always going to be the case. It is very subjective. It really depends how deep is the wound. So why the mother? Why am I talking so much about the mother? Actually, in reality, mother represents our first relationship with life. So mother represents anything we feel is blocking our life, does not make sense about our life, represents how complex our relationship was with our mother. So mother represents life. Mother also represents safety. So if there are people who feel anxious all the time, we have to go back and see what happened between this child, who is an adult now, with their mother. So anxiousness also means there is some trauma of attachment between the child and the mother. Something about that has not been established fully, and the child had to become hypervigilant to scan for safety all the time. So mother represents life, mother represents safety. Mother also represents nourishment. What about nourishment? So I've done these cases where people are like, I have no idea why I'm having so much of food cravings and things like that. And when we do the constellation, what comes up is that something about the bond between the child and the mother uh, got disconnected. There was this interruption between the mother and the child. And for example, I had done this case, it's just at the top of my mind now, that when one of my client was doing this session with me, what came up was when she was 3 months old, the mother got pregnant with the second child. And the child was being breastfed as a 3 months old, right? And the moment the subsequent pregnancy happened, the mother could no longer give that breast milk to this client of mine when she was 3 months old. So now she has developed that unconscious behavior to hog on food, right? Because her own unmet attachment or need from the mother was abruptly interrupted when the second pregnancy happened, right? So this also causes issues with nourishment. Mother also represents our belonging, right? Do we belong in our system? Was I wanted? Right? Was I a planned child? Often people come in sessions and say, oh, so I'm having conflicts with my husband. And the next question I would often ask is, how does that make you feel? Oh, I feel unwanted. I feel rejected. So who was the first person to make you feel that way? All right. And oftentimes it's the mother. I feel rejected. I feel unwanted. I was unplanned, right? Mother also represents our trust towards life. Are we able to trust life and whatever life has to offer us? Mother also represents receptivity. Are we able to receive love? Are we able to receive abundance? Are we able to receive joy and happiness or some form of belonging? Mothers also represent our emotional regulation. So the emotional atmosphere that we normally experience in our life. For example, I have always had anxiety growing up. And sometimes it still gets flared up. Like 2 months ago, when I had that ligament tearing, my anxiety came back again. And I had to sit with it. This time in a very different way. I mean, that is another subject. But this time I felt I was not relating to anxiety in order to push it away. I sat with it. I really sat with it. I said, okay, let's sit together. I don't want to push you out now. So I was talking to anxiety as if it's a person, as if it's a. So, of course, that is something that I have not been able to establish with my mother. After having done so much of inner work, I don't see much change with my mother. But I do see how I relate to myself, how I relate to life, how I relate to my body, how I relate to anxiety. Mothers also represent love, which is a very fundamental need for each one of us. Mothers also represent our bodies. So if there are health issues, we have to go back and see how our relationship with our mother was. Is there a hidden loyalty? So if a mother has any health issue, am I also unconsciously loyal to that health issue? Mother represents the energy of home. If you're always changing our places, we are going from one place to another all the time and we feel unsettled in life, right? We have to go back and see who's moved. So why? So of course there could be multiple things around that, but often what uncovers is that if the energy of the mother was unstable for you as a child, love came and so love came as conditions. You had to do some performance for your mother. Was the love of your mother consistent, or was it conditioned to certain performance? So that instability that you experience growing up between you and your mother can cause instability in your life, in your relationships, right? And of course, if as girl children, as daughters, if our connection to our mother was not healthy, the same sex parent, so to speak, if that was not healthy, we will also not be able to connect to our inner feminine energy. We'll fall more into the masculine energy. So what is masculine energy? Trying to protect ourselves, always guarding my heart, not allowing, maybe intimacy, or not allowing love to come in my life. There could be multiple issues, but unable to connect with the inner feminine, because we all have inner feminine and masculine energy inside of us. Won't be able to connect to that if the connection between us and the mother was wounded. Any questions so far, guys? Good. Any questions?
So basically, what we are trying to say is this is carries on from generation to
Yeah,
generation, whatever
absolutely.
trauma there is.
Absolutely.
So, like when one does a session with you, I mean, just to know a little
Yeah,
more,
sure.
how do we know whether it's the trauma or is it the family constellation which reveals what the problem is?
Yes. The process, the healing process of constellation actually reveals what consciousness of a family field or of our own self. We have a consciousnesses also, right? What part of us is blocking so and so situation, or what is causing our life not to feel fulfilling, for example, or to experience certain patterns again and again. So the process itself reveals what's happening. Where is this coming from? Am I repeating somebody's life or somebody's story, somebody's experiences? Oftentimes, it's seen that as children, we repeat stories of a family system. And who is the first point of contact to get that inherited from? The mother, while we are in her womb, right? So we actually biologically get affected by the maternal line first. And then, of course, the sperm is also there that that creates a child, right? So that also begins to influence us. So definitely, it's the process that reveals where it is coming from.
So is it like, do you talk to people or is it a kind of, what is the process?
The
I'm
process.
just a little eager to know because I am interested in this, but I would also like to know what is the process through which you find out, like,
So there are different processes I do. Sometimes I use puppets, and the kind of puppets people pick up. So if there are, if my client is, for example, a 40-year-old person, and they select a small child to begin with, the first impression I receive is that yes, they are still operating from a child's consciousness, even though they are 40, 45, 50-year old. So, and of course, I can't make that. I've been doing this work for like 9 or 10 years now. So, whatever the client picks up talks about where their consciousness is frozen in time and what happened. Are they entangled between the story of a mother and father? And so I can ask them, okay, pick one to represent yourself, pick one to represent the block in your success. So, as a block, they pick up a man or a energy that is bigger, that is more authoritative than the client. So my next question to them would be, how was your relationship with your father? Or if it was a woman, how was your relationship to your mother? And they have picked up baby puppet for themselves. So I've got baby puppets also. So they've picked up that one. What happens when you were a child? Oh, when I was a child, my mom and dad used to fight a lot. So they can pick up a small baby also as a 40-year-old. So it reveals. So it's a very magical process, honestly. And it reveals, basically. It has to be, it's a very experiential process. All right. And of course, in constellation, we also understand the universal laws that are violated by family systems, and people are not aware of those violations. And because of those violations, also, there are repercussions, there are consequences in the system that's also been passing down and not getting resolved. Okay, as I move on, and
thank
have
you.
some, what is that clarifying, Ramni?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
So many mothers carried impressions of war. So they were influenced by the collective wars also that were happening. So collective wars, migrations tend to influence individual family systems, and individual family systems have mothers, have fathers, have children. They too used to get affected. So mothers carrying war impressions, migration trauma, their own stories of miscarriages. So if they had miscarriages and they had fertility issues, or they were being abused and violated by the fathers, by the patriarchal system, right? If there was poverty in their childhood, right, that also creates certain beliefs around money, certain beliefs around how to be a girl child or how to be a woman, how to relate to men. So our mother's belief also affects how we relate to the opposite gender, right? I see that all the time. If mothers were wounded by their own brothers and fathers, they create those very limiting beliefs about masculine energy. And that also gets to be passed down. And because it's a belief that we have seen and heard so many times, and we have invisibly inherited that also, when we grow up, we also attract a similar partner to what the belief is resonating with. So nobody is free when it comes to that kind of stuff. So poverty, violence, abandonment, these are things our mothers have been influenced with. Domestic abuse, patriarchy. So patriarchy means control over women, how women are perceived, how men are perceived, how religion is also forcefully enforced upon, a girl child, do's and don'ts, right? All that affects our mothers. Unwanted pregnancies, excluded family members. Of course, that's a very deep topic in constellation work. How members are excluded in family systems, and how our mother could also be entangled in some of these excluded ancestors coming from her lineage. Children who died. So, if our mother had, for example, 7 to 8 siblings and 1 or 2 of them died, of course, I have those stories in my system. So, that's what I'm relating to. So, if there was a tragedy of losing siblings when the mother was young, that is also going to create exclusion within her system, and she could get entangled with their destinies. I mean, of course, that's an unconscious loyalty that I always talk about. She can get entangled with that. She can also feel guilty for having survived. I just did a session 2 days ago with someone, and her mother had lost a sibling brother in a car accident or in some train accident, something like that. And the mother survived as a child, but her brother, as a child, could not survive that accident. And the entire life of her mother since her childhood, so the childhood of the mother, was about being abandoned. So the mother in her childhood of my client was sent away to boarding school, and was always had to hear that you survived and he could not. You survived and he could not. So she was also living like a dead person, alive, but away from love, very much guarded. And the trauma of my client was that I always feel my mother didn't love me. My mother was very authoritative, very disciplinarian for me. And my mother kept me at a distance. So, what had happened in the life of the mother causing her not to connect with her own child? So, it's a generation. So, of course, I had to work with the survivor's guilt that some of us are aware of. So, the mother was carrying the survivor's guilt. Why did I survive? Right? At the expense of my brother. So, there was guilt around having survived. And that is what we work with them. So, mother wound. And then, of course, there is family shame also. Shame is a huge subject on its own. Maybe there'll be another awareness talk that I'll do on family shame. So mothers also inherit their own system's shame. For example, if they belong to a system where there was colonization, for example, and their system went through shame and abuse of some sort, that incident is not going to dissolve on its own. It's going to affect subsequent generations, right? Okay, so how mother wound shows up. Like I said, it can show up in relationships with fear of abandonment. Okay, I'll go very quickly with this, and then you can ask me questions, and maybe we'll do some reflective questions also in the end. So relationships, fear of abandonment, fear of intimacy, right? Having intimacy issues also. Overgiving. So as a girl child, when we have relationships in our adult life, we may end up over sacrificing, overstretching ourselves, overgiving ourselves to our partner, and that also creates imbalance in that relationship. So where did we learn that in the first place? Where did we have to perform and overstretch and overgive ourselves? It's an experience that we learn in our childhood. Choosing unavailable partners. Okay, so all of these are big themes that are affected because of the mother wound. Then difficulty receiving money. So when it comes to money, difficulty receiving money, asking for the balanced money for our services, for example, feeling undeserving of wealth, of acknowledgement, of recognition in your line of work, working excessively, okay, sometimes becoming workaholic as well. So it affects our money reality. Bert Hellinger, who is the founder of Family Constellation, he said something very beautiful, and that sometimes sticks with me. He says, money carries the face of the mother. So how we relate to money carries the face of the mother, all right? Then mother's wound also affect our health. Like I said, anxiety, chronic stress, unregulated nervous system, that creates autoimmune chronic diseases, right? Fatigue, often insomnia. I had done these cases of insomnia as well, where it takes the client back to the time when they were a baby, and something about the connection of the mother and the child got interrupted, and now the child is unable to, as in their adult life, of course, are unable to have a restful sleep because something about their childhood is now getting triggered in their adult years. How we connect to ourselves. So self-worth is also affected because of the mother wound. Never feeling enough, the need to be perfect all the time, self-criticism, right? All of these come from that. So I'll give you some reflective questions, and maybe you can see if anything resonates for you. Which statement resonates most, and whichever out of these resonates with you, you can maybe write that down and think about it. I struggle to receive love. If that's true for you, maybe you can write that down. I constantly seek approval from others. I overgive. I feel responsible for everyone. I struggle to rest. I fear being rejected. Tell me, guys, if I'm going too fast, huh? I fear being rejected. I don't feel good enough. I don't know who I am. I feel emotionally disconnected. So, which means I feel numb, I feel frozen, I can't connect with emotions. Oftentimes, people have those things that I don't know what emotions I'm feeling or experiencing. I feel lost in life. I fear becoming like my mother, right? Often people come and say that I don't want to be, I'm not like my mother. And then when we do the inner work, it comes up how much of the mother is inside of them through their behavior. Yeah, note down anything that resonates, and before I end, we'll have 5 to 10 minutes of personal sharing if anybody wants to share or ask any questions. And I'll take maybe 3-4 minutes more to wrap this up. So what happens if the mother wound remains unhealed, right? What happens? So I often tell my clients, the mother wound is really about your mother alone. It becomes the lens through which you experience yourself, others, and life, because the mother is a first relationship with life. An unresolved mother wound can affect almost all areas of our adult life. So what happens if that wound remains unhealed is that we won't be able to experience life with a separate perspective of what was handed down to us. And that is a choice we make. Do I need to experience life as it is happening, or do I take control of what happened to me and come to a different conclusion, come to a different reality from what was given to me? So there are these cases that happens when I talk about difficulty in receiving life, receiving love. So the example I'll give you of a woman who earns well, but immediately spends whatever money comes to her. So every time abundance comes, she sabotages it. So unconsciously, she may be saying that I cannot receive more than what my mother could. So if the mother was also blocked in receiving, as a daughter, it may feel disloyal. And of course, this is very unconscious. That is why inner work is important. So we can block our own happiness, abundance, and success if our mother could not experience it. So her inner language could be, I cannot receive more than what my mother could. Oftentimes, I've seen this happening in cases where the mother was educated, for example, but did not have a purpose of her own, could not earn for herself, right? And when she has a daughter, the daughter has a career and a successful one. But something about her career creates blocks, or she experiences blocks, right? So when she does the inner work, it comes up that she feels unconsciously, of course, guilty for living a life that is different from the mother's life. So in constellation work, we seek permission, we seek blessings, we seek some form of permission from the mother, and we allow that guilt, which is very unconscious, to be recognized, to be acknowledged, so that the child uh, does not continue sabotaging their success and growth because the mother could not have hers. All right. Then people pleasing is also a very common behavior for daughters who had to perform some form of work, some form of hard work or effort in order to gain approval from the mother. So they develop that. So this is something that I had experience with my mother. I had to do a lot of housework. I had to become like my mother when I was just a child in order to seek her attention. And I grew up doing a lot of housework all the time. And of course, when I did my inner work, it came. And then there was a time when my body started exhausting, and of course, the inner work revealed that the need to please my mother with excessive housework, doing all the work, over giving, over sacrificing yourself for, for other people, tends to exhaust your own inner life force energy. You are depleting your own inner life force energy in order to receive love that is so much conditioned on performance. Yeah. I'll give another very quick example of how the mother wound affects the sense of being rejected. So, if a girl child feels fear of rejection, she is going to, or she's carrying the belief that something is fundamentally wrong with her and she will be rejected, she may attract partners who are emotionally unavailable or toxic or abusive as well. For example, someone remains in a toxic marriage for 20 years, not because they enjoy suffering, but because abandonment feels even more frightening. Abandonment feels as if life-threatening for some people as well. So they are unable to make that movement because something about leaving even that toxic relationship feels life-threatening. So what happened in your childhood? What happened with your mother? Was your mother also experiencing something similar? So oftentimes, what I've seen in such cases of fear of rejection is that the mother also had that same fear. So the same fear unconsciously was handed down to the girl child, and it becomes her reality as well. All right. So these are some of the examples, guys. Any questions? I mean, I can go on and on with this. It is very fundamentally important for all the children, boys or girls, daughters and sons, to be physically comforted by the mother. Physically comforted by the mother. Being held. I said that in the beginning of this talk as well. The need to be held physically is so important. Why? Because recently I did a session with someone who had paralysis of legs a year and a half ago. And of course, when I'm doing sessions with her, in one of the sessions, what came up was her 7-year-old part came up in her child who wanted to be just held by the mother, but the mother lived in a joint family system where she was already burdened by so many other responsibilities that she had no time to hold the child who is now completing that movement. Guys, try to understand what I'm saying. I'll see if I can have better words to explain that. So through physiotherapy, through acupuncture, she's being held, she's being touched. It's still a movement. Yes, it's a wrong way to receive it by unconsciously creating a health issue. But when we look at what happened in her childhood, where does this trauma comes from? What part of her wants to be held? It comes from her unmet needs to be held by the mother, to be physically nurtured. And so, because what happens is that if a child does not get that physical affection and being held by the mother, the child does not create their sense of own identity. Their own physical body will not feel attuned. They will not have And that creates issues with boundaries also, right? Because that boundary has not been established in their childhood. So such people can get too merged with their partners later on. They may get too clingy with their partners. They may desire too much of physical affection by their partners, and they may not receive it. Why? Because the first experience of that person in their childhood was of neglect and unmet needs. So that trauma is going to keep on repeating itself like a movie till we do the inner work, till we free our partners from that responsibility in the first place. We let go of that need from our partners and we go back and try and heal the wound between us and our mother, who was unable to give that physical affection. So physical affection, as I'm doing more work on myself, I'm also realizing how important it is to be held by the mother. And of course, by the father also. But at the moment, I'm focusing more on this topic. So the need to be held. And maybe for all of us, all of you guys, if you feel resonation with this, maybe every day for the next few days, you can hold a pillow and feel as if you are holding that part of you which could not get that nourishment from the mother. It can be an emotional nourishment, as I'm talking about, it can be a physical nourishment, whatever that is. Pick up a pillow or a cushion and feel as if you are connecting with that part that needed to be held by the mother. And of course, that is the work I'm doing for myself as well as I'm recovering. So I'll give you a few more reflection statements. And I mean, you can sit with that after the, we've got 7 or 8 minutes more. Maybe finish these sentences. So it's like a fill in the blank. My mother taught me about love. So what did your mother taught you about love? It's a very, very important question. What did your mother taught you about love? What is love? This is one question. And stop me if I'm going too fast. The next question is, women are. So what did she teach you about being a woman or a girl child? What did you hear from her? What did your mother teach you about money? What did you hear from her about money? What did she teach you about money? What did you hear about that? So about love, about being a woman or a girl child. What did you hear about money? What did you hear about men or the opposite gender? What did your mother teach you about masculine energy? What did she teach you about your needs as a woman? What did she teach you about self-love? And because of what you saw growing up, how did she um, how did she talked about herself also? How did she saw herself? Because that becomes an inner image of us as ourself also. So if she saw herself as self-sacrificer or overgiver, we end up doing the same thing, and that is very unconscious behavior that was modeled. So how did she relate to herself? Yeah. And if anybody would like to share any insights or have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And sorry, I do go fast because it's only 1 hour. So I want to talk about as much as possible. So I do go fast. So anybody wants to share anything, any insight, any questions, anything that resonates with you guys from your own personal experiences, I'll be happy to hear about that. Maybe just one or two lines or whatever.
That's just,
Yeah, Claudia.
I totally agree with you because remember when we were learning and studying and when we were practicing throughout, the mother, we all learned and experienced that the mother's first touch is the most basic and important thing in life. Once this is missing or this is disconnected, then the effect is powerful.
Absolutely.
And after all the work that I have done on this issue, I still struggle to rest just like her. Exactly like her. And then I would go and,
God.
lecture her. You need to rest. It's impossible to continue like this. You've grown old. And then as you were talking, I looked at myself. I was like, oh my goodness. I don't know
Telling her
how
what
to
I
rest.
need to do for myself.
I don't know how to rest. I don't know how to sit and say, okay, today I am off and I have nothing to do. And I was like, tomorrow Saturday, and it's the first Saturday in 4 months that I am not doing anything.
Yeah,
I was
and
like,
it feels guilty, right? When you have to rest.
it's scary. It's
Scary.
scary. Like I have nothing to do. What do you mean there is nothing to do, right? So yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree.
Yeah, the exhaustion that comes with, with these experiences, right? Because we saw mothers exhausted, over functioning, over performing. I don't know, in order to please how many people, consciously and unconsciously also. It's
And the
very
guilt,
unconscious
if
behavior.
if we rest, if I take a day off, I feel like, oh my God, I look on the subconscious level, there is a sense of guilt, like I'm resting today, and out
That
of
was modeled, right?
guilt, loyalty, like I'm resting, she's not. So it's definitely 100%.
And like I said, we can't go back and tell our mothers, can you do that so that I'm able to do it also? That again becomes a blind loyalty. I want my
Yeah.
mother to take that initiative first, and I'm not
So
taking
that
it
I
for
can
myself.
follow her. Yeah, so that I can follow with peace.
So imagine if you're aware and still doing that. What about those people who are unaware? How much of their mother and their fathers are still influencing their life and they are not aware of it? Bless them, seriously.
True, very true, very true.
Thank you, Claudia, for sharing that. Devaki, Mavish,
welcome.
Ramni, any question, any insight? How was the whole 1 hour?
Actually, Claudia really summed it up very well. And when you actually, you were talking and asking these questions, it is an eye opener. I mean, one is subconsciously conscious aware of it, and I think when you start becoming a little conscious, like I lost my mother when she was young, when I was very young. So I mean, I was 26. And I had two small children, and I could see the difference in, when I had my second child and she expired soon after, the kind of attention I put into my second child was very less as compared to the first, because I was grieving.
Yeah,
right.
correct. So that became
So, I
a
mean, I
trauma,
didn't.
no? That was a
Right.
trauma tragedy for you.
Right. Right. So what I felt is like, now that one is aware, what is the next step to kind of overcome it and get rid of whatever is holding you back, or your
it's very
journey
important
ahead?
to see. So Ramni, it's very important to see what about my life at the present moment feels unsettling for me, feels difficult for me. So we start from there, and then that's how we take those baby steps and go back and see where this is coming from. Yes, all those stories had happened, but not every story will have the same impact. So we have to see what about my life right now. So my relationship with my children, my relationship with my body, my relationship with my work, if anything about that, relationship with my man, for example, right, in the marriage. So if anything about that feels unsettling, that's when we do this work. Otherwise, we don't need to go back and see all the stories. We don't.
Can I also share something?
Yeah.
It's like from our experiences, like learning and practicing with Shasta. The thing is, when we set up and we have the intention of a constellation, we
Hmm.
don't only actually come up with actually what exactly we want, because we set the intention that we want this, but whatever is revealed in the constellation could be
Yeah,
mind-blowing and could take us from one place to another place, which we were
yeah,
100% not aware of. So yes, the
absolutely.
intention in the constellation is there, but what the field may reveal depends on what exactly the person needs right now in that particular space and time.
Absolutely.
And once we experience it, it's not only knowing, because consciously we know, the mind knows, but when we embody and we go through the process, it's a different feel, and it's like taking the process from one space to another.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I'm doing these sessions, sometimes it's so mind-boggling that my client, even though they are 40, 50, are still stuck in something that happened much before they were born. So maybe if there were mass murders, for example, in the family system, I see my clients still entangled in that story, and they are right in the middle of that story. And I tell my client, can I move you from that timeline to this current timeline, which is 2025, 2026? Do you want to move from there? Because this story that happened where many people had lost their life is still having influence on you, for example. So if you're going through bankruptcy, or if you're, having health issues, that timeline is affecting you because a part of your consciousness is loyal to that story of your family. So can I move you from here to here? And that's when my client starts feeling, oh my God, that's why I wasn't able to experience this, because my consciousness is still stuck and loyal to that very tragic family story. It could be migration, it could be war, it could be mass murders, it could be a story of infidelity. And sometimes there are curses in families. How do we deal with them? So through constellation work, we release those curses, not with vengeance or anything like that. We release them with love and compassion and forgiveness. And sometimes people don't even know that there are curses blocking their pathway to further to the future. Yeah. So that was it, I think, for today. Thank you guys for joining. It was lovely having you all here. And I would like to hear your comments in the community. I'm sure all of you are in the community. So I would love to hear from you. And next, I think I will be talking about father's wound also, maybe next Friday, same time, probably. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was very, very informative.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Take care.
Thank
Have a
you.
good day.
Thank
Bye-bye.
Bye.
you.
Thank you.